the UFC only pays its fighters like 10% of its income, whereas like in the NBA and NFL, the athletes get paid 50% of the total income. So like this is a massive discrepancy. They don't have health insurance, all of these things.
When Jake Paul called out Dana White for underpaying fighters, very few had the guts to back him up. But now, a massive wave of shocking betrayals and scandals has forced UFC stars to finally rise against White. The revolt has begun, and the empire is cracking. Dana White is the problem. That's not some random fan's drunken fight night tweet. That's not a rogue Twitter rant. Those are the very words fighters, yes, multiple, are whispering behind the scenes, and a few are even shouting them publicly. And this time, it's not just about missed bonuses or sketchy decisions. This is something much deeper, a quiet, organized rebellion from the very people Dana White relies on most. His fighters. Because while the world sees Dana as a fearless promoter, a genius businessman, and the man who saved MMA, what they don't see is the empire of exploitation he's built behind the Octagon. But now, the warriors of that empire are saying one word: enough. In this exposé, you'll hear the most shocking quote yet. A UFC champion openly saying on camera that Dana White doesn't give a damn about us. But first, let's uncover how the UFC's carefully crafted image is starting to crumble from within, and how it all began with the one man Dana White never saw coming: Jake Paul.
They don't have health insurance, all of these things, and so I just started simply speaking on it, and it became this massive thing between me and Dana White where we just constantly were beefing back and forth for years. But genuinely, I was just like, hey man, you're paying these fighters a minimum of $12,000 for a fight. They're risking their lives. Why not just increase it to $50,000? You're gonna make the sport better because they're gonna take it more seriously.
These weren't just words from a YouTuber turned boxer. This was the spark that ignited a fire across the entire MMA world. Fighters who once stayed loyal suddenly found their voices through the most unexpected megaphone. And what they began to reveal was nothing short of horrifying. At first, Jake Paul's attacks were dismissed as trolling. But soon, people realized he was saying what UFC athletes had been too afraid to admit publicly: that fighters are being paid poverty-level wages while putting their lives on the line. That there's no long-term health coverage, no retirement plan, and sometimes not even a guarantee of payment unless they follow Dana White's rules. Let that sink in. This isn't about one or two bad contracts. This is about a systemic machine that chews up its talent and calls it promotion. Fighters risking brain damage for $12,000 while the UFC rakes in billions every year. How is that sustainable? It's not. And now fighters know it. Take Max Holloway. A fan favorite, a warrior in every sense of the word. He stepped into the cage against Dustin Poirier and delivered one of the most emotional wars the sport had seen in years. But when the fight ended, he walked out feeling betrayed. Not because he lost, he didn't. He felt betrayed because he didn't get fight of the night. And deep down, he knew exactly why.
How the hell did we not get fight of the night, bro? What is he thinking, bro? Come on, Dana.
That's not a sore loser talking. That's a champion exposing the truth. Max Holloway wasn't saying Dana White doesn't see greatness. He was saying Dana controls it. Because if you're not in Dana's good graces, if you're not obedient, if you're not a company man, your bonus disappears, your title shot vanishes, and your name slowly gets erased from the spotlight. And then comes the disrespect. You'd think a fighter who's gone through 3 wars with Volkanovski, survived brutal rounds with Poirier, and become a BMF legend would at least get a thank you. But no, Max had to beg the UFC just to acknowledge his victory with a proper bonus. And even then, Dana didn't budge. Through it all, Max kept smiling. Why? Because he knew something bigger was happening. The revolt had already begun. Quietly, subtly, but undeniably. Because when someone like Max Holloway starts pointing fingers, that means it's no longer just the Jake Pauls of the world making noise. It's the fighters you'd never expect. The ones who always kept their heads down, fought injured, starved themselves to make weight, and defended the organization, who are now finally calling it out. And this isn't just about money. It's about manipulation, control, and fear. Most UFC fighters can't even talk about pay on record without risking their contracts. Some have reportedly been threatened with being blacklisted just for mentioning collective bargaining. Think about that. In a world where every major sport has player unions, the UFC still runs on total control. The contracts don't just bind fighters, they own them. They control a fighter's likeness, restrict sponsorships, dictate medical access, and even decide when and where a fighter can train and who they can train with. It's not a sport. It's feudalism, wrapped in a Reebok kit. And yet, Dana White sits at press conferences, laughing off criticism like it's all a joke. But to the fighters, it's not a joke. It's life and death. This is the part they never show you on UFC Embedded. The part where the empire starts to crack from within. Fighters don't just fight once on fight night, they fight twice. Once inside the cage and once outside it, begging their managers to front them money just to pay rent. In that same video, Jake Paul didn't just talk about fighter pay. He exposed the culture of silence that Dana White built. Because when Dana isn't lowballing contracts, he's publicly humiliating any fighter who dares to step out of line. Remember when Francis Ngannou left the UFC? Dana claimed Francis didn't want to take risks. The truth? Francis walked away because he refused to sign an extension that stripped away his freedom. An extension that would have locked him into the UFC and banned him from pursuing boxing, where he could earn more in a single fight than in 5 UFC title defenses. This wasn't about an athlete being difficult. It was about a man refusing to be owned. And how did Dana respond? With smears, spin, and silence. Overnight, Ngannou was painted as a coward, a duck, a diva, a so-called quitter. But a few months later, he stepped into the boxing ring with Tyson Fury and shook the entire combat sports world. That wasn't luck. That was freedom. And that's what really scares Dana White. Not Jake Paul's viral rants. Not Max Holloway's subtle digs. But the idea that UFC fighters might finally realize their true worth, that they deserve more, and have the courage to walk away. But here's the most dangerous part of all. They're talking to each other. Behind the scenes, multiple sources say fighters are using group chats, private Discord servers, and secret meetings to compare contracts, share horror stories, and even explore the unthinkable, unionizing. That's right. The one thing Dana White has always feared most, a united front. Because revolutions don't start with explosions. They start with whispers. And right now, the UFC locker rooms are echoing with them. So when Jake Paul says,
knocked out a 5-time UFC champion and embarrassed your whole company, and please let me get Kamaru Usman, please let me get Diaz, please let me get Masvidal, please let me get McGregor, because I'm gonna embarrass them too. I promise you that, Dana. I promise you that.
That's not just an insult, that's a warning. A warning that the fighters are watching, and they're done being silent, because the machine of manipulation runs deep, deeper than anyone outside the cage ever realized. What fans thought was just about low fighter pay or missed bonuses is only the surface. Beneath it lies a web of rigged contracts, broken promises, and a corporate culture built to crush rebellion before it can even begin. Fighters aren't just controlled through money. They're controlled through legal traps, media spin, and psychological warfare so intense it would make even Vince McMahon blush. This is Dana White's UFC. A system where former champions, rising prospects, and company veterans are finally starting to speak up in ways the organization never wanted the public to hear. So, let's talk about what you were never supposed to know. Let's talk about the lawsuits. In 2021, the UFC quietly tried to bury a massive class action lawsuit involving dozens of fighters. At the heart of it were explosive allegations that the UFC used exclusive contracts, predatory acquisitions, and coercive tactics to illegally suppress fighter pay and eliminate competition in the sport. One legal filing even described the UFC as a monopoly, a company that uses its power to keep fighters dependent, underpaid, and too afraid to speak up. And it gets worse. According to court documents, some UFC contracts were so restrictive that fighters couldn't even compete in other organizations or retire and fight elsewhere without risking a lawsuit. You heard that right. Even if you quit fighting, they could still come after you. That's what happens when a promotion turns into a prison. And Dana White, he hasn't addressed any of this directly. Instead, he hides behind slick marketing, viral press conferences, and the illusion that he's just giving fans what they want. But behind the curtain, fighters are now describing a UFC where loyalty is demanded, not earned. And the growing frustration is not just about the money anymore. It's about something much deeper. Disrespect, that's what it really is. A kind of emotional manipulation where fighters are left constantly guessing whether their loyalty will be rewarded or punished. Max Holloway gave the fans a war. He gave Dustin Poirier a respectful send-off. He gave the UFC everything they could have asked for. And what did he get in return? Silence. And this isn't some isolated case. Jorge Masvidal, once one of Dana's favorite poster boys, revealed in a 2019 interview that even he had to fight for fair pay after headlining massive events. At one point, Masvidal went public, accusing the UFC of shortchanging him. "I'm not asking for anything outrageous. I'm just asking for a little more than what I got last time." And how did Dana respond? By minimizing it, by joking, by gaslighting. That's the pattern. Every time a fighter speaks up, the UFC paints them as ungrateful, delusional, or replaceable. But now, even the golden boys are turning. Take Sean O'Malley, one of the most exciting and marketable fighters in the modern UFC. In an interview with Ariel Helwani, O'Malley admitted that early in his UFC career, he was making just $3,000 per fight, despite being heavily promoted on ESPN as one of the sport's future stars. $3,000 to get punched in the face on national television. And for years, he didn't even dare question it. Because in the UFC, fighters are taught one thing: shut up and fight. And if you don't, Dana White will make an example out of you. Jake Paul knows this. That's why his words sting so much. He's not just taunting the UFC, he's exposing it. Exposing the double standard at the heart of Dana's empire. Pay fighters crumbs, then trash them when they dare to leave. Meanwhile, Jake offers them what the UFC never did: freedom, big paydays, and dignity. No wonder Nantu left. No wonder Nate Diaz walked away. And no wonder more and more fighters are starting to ask questions, not just in private but publicly. At the end of his emotional post-fight press conference, Max Holloway was asked about his coaches, the people who raised him, guided him, and kept him grounded. His answer wasn't about violence. It was about character.
A good person, be a good person, and they're great guys, I mean, they keep me in check. I mean, I can't say enough nice things about them, I love.
Read between the lines. What Max Holloway is really saying is, my loyalty is to the people who actually care about me, not the company that uses me for ticket sales and tosses me aside when I'm no longer trending. And fans are starting to catch on. Go to Reddit, Twitter, or any MMA forum. You'll see a new narrative taking shape. Not Dana saved the UFC, but Dana is the problem. Because the more fighters speak up, the clearer it becomes. The UFC has survived for years on one thing: fear. Fear of being cut. Fear of being sidelined. Fear of being mocked. Fear of being silenced. But when that fear disappears, you get revolution. And there's one thing Dana White has always understood better than almost anyone: control the narrative and you control the fighter. For the longest time, the UFC didn't just own the Octagon, it owned the people inside it. Literally. From the way they fight to the way they dress to the way they speak to the media. Let's rewind to 2015, the moment the UFC signed its controversial exclusive outfitting deal with Reebok. It was marketed as a professional, modern move: clean uniforms, consistent branding, big business. But behind the scenes, it was economic warfare. Overnight, fighters lost the right to display personal sponsors during fight week. No more logos on shorts. No more walkout banners. No more deals with local gyms or supplement companies. What did that mean? It meant that independent fighters, the ones grinding at the bottom of the roster, instantly lost thousands of dollars per fight. In some cases, even top-ranked fighters were losing more from lost sponsorship income than they were earning from the actual fight purse. According to MMA Fighting, Dana White brushed off the backlash, saying, "This is a fight, not a team sport. They'll adjust." But fighters knew exactly what that meant. Shut up and wear what we